Welcome back, guys. Today we're on another video and we got the parts for the 91 MR2. So we have our suspension pieces here. So today is the day that we're gonna get everything installed, car lowered, looking fresh, and I can't wait to see what it looks like. So I ordered some parts from Rock Auto and I got the KYB XLG shocks, not the conies like everybody says you should get. So I went to the cheaper version because this is a budget build. So I'm going to show you what's in the box. These are KYBs. I'll show you the part number right here. This is for a 91 MR2 if you're doing like an OEM refresh. So basically using the stock struts and just rebuilding it up and not breaking the bank. So what do we have inside this box here? Let's see. So this is for the rear and they come with a gas-filled strut, right? Gas-filled strut, and it also comes with a gland nut and the nut for the top up here. So it's basically 3 pieces in the box. And here you go. So this is what it looks like. This is your new gland nut, and this is a new nut for the top of the strut mount. So this is what we're gonna use. We're not using back anything from the old piece that we took out except the strut housing. And I got some sway bar links because the ones on the car I wasn't sure, you know, some of them are broken, some of them are good, so I just figured I'd replace everything. So these are moved. They're pretty heavy duty, they're kind of thick. So here we go. So these are some heavy duty stuff and they come with a grease nipple. I hope they're not too big when we install them, but it says it's for this car, okay? And that's the part number. And then I got these are Mevotech or Movitech, I don't know. So these also look pretty decent, and these are for the fronts. So we have the sway bar links, we got the shocks. I did get this one I assembled already because I did a dry run on it. So got a new strut mounts. This thing is like butter, look at that. So this is how it's done, and I just want to point out when you guys are installing it, you got to clock this top spring perch or whatever you call it, the top portion. There's a sign on here that says out. Got to make sure this is lined up with this right here to be able to put this on the proper orientation. But anyways, let's just jump right into the time lapse here, get this front part done, and then we're gonna move right on to the rear. All right, so we're gonna attempt to start the assembly process right now and just go straight through and get this thing finished, right? Fingers crossed it goes well. In the world of mechanics, it doesn't always work well, so hey, let's hope for the best. But we're gonna take our new XLG strut shock absorber and we're gonna slip it into here. Now, before you do that, I should check this, I'm not sure. We just wanna look down in here because I cleaned this already, but make sure there's no debris. And this flashlight stopped working. Just make sure there's nothing stuck inside here. Should be clean. Conies recommend putting like if you're gonna do Coney shocks, I know you'll basically put like transmission fluid or coolant or even oil down in here. That's their recommendation from what I understand. KYB does not recommend that, so you basically just throw this thing in there and hope for the best. So I'm just gonna go with that. So drop this in right here. Then you're gonna take your gland nut and you're gonna slip it over, making sure you don't nick this piston here, because this thing needs to be nice and smooth, no damage, otherwise it damages the seal inside. So just take your time, go down nicely, and it should just thread in by hand. If it's going in like this and it's not smooth, you got a problem. So just play around with it a little bit here, and you should get a nice, see how that's going smoothly? Should be like that, okay? So don't force it. It should go all the way down smoothly until it's time for you to tighten it up, okay? So I'm just gonna put on my little vise right here. And I'm using a different wrench. If you watch my previous videos on the 93, you've seen me use this wrench before. It's a useful tool. I'm happy when I get a chance to use this. So I'm just gonna go on here, and I don't have the ability to torque this because I don't have a gland nut tool. I'm just gonna go down, I'm just gonna tighten it. Just gonna get it tight. The whole objective here is to get this thing in where it doesn't come loose, right? So I'm just gonna put some pressure on it. This is a pretty big wrench, so if you put some pressure on it and don't go crazy to wring this thread out, you should be fine. So there you go. Again, I'm just hand tightening it. You're gonna have to, if you're doing this at home, determine what hand tight is for you. And when you're done, this shock should be firm in place. As you can see, it's not moving around. So that is what I call good and tight, okay? All right, from here, we're gonna get our spring. And like I said, I already compressed with the spring compressors, and I'm hoping this works because I put the other side on without using spring compressors, but it was a pain. So I decided to use it. And in this case, I'm using H&R spring, so you can kind of tell the cylindrical portion of the spring right here goes to the bottom. The flattened section goes on the top, but you can always tell if you have H&Rs. Just go with how the writing is. It should be upright. So now we're going to slide this on. This section right here needs to slip right in this groove, okay? So make sure you get the proper orientation. All right. So just like that. Proper orientation right there. And then you don't want to forget your dust boot, because if you forget your dust boot, then you're gonna have to pull the system apart after you've proudly installed everything. So this just goes on right here. Now, this is a tip. This is what I did. See those white lines right here? I just kind of marked those. Those are the flat sections of the top mount here. And I did that so when I put this thing down, I can basically look from underneath and make sure it's lined up here. Now that's why I did it without the spring compressor. I'm hoping with the spring compressor it brings it down enough where I don't have to rely on that, okay? And then another thing, the orientation of this thing here, as you can see, there's a section that says out. It's right here. I'm trying to do this with one hand. See right there, that says out. So basically, it needs to point to the outside of the car. So this is the inside of the car, so it's the opposite side. So the out needs to be on this side, okay? And if you look at the flat section, see the flat section? If you go this direction right here, that's out. So I kind of put some marks on the top as well. So that is pointing to out. And now I have to turn this shock. So basically once I put the mount down, see that orientation? It's gonna help to put it in the right place. So I'm putting the flat section in line with the base of the strut here. So kind of mirroring these two lines with these two flat lines here. Hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, send me a comment. I'll try to explain it better for you. But see, these two flat lines are lining up with these tabs on the strut, okay? Next comes our rubber. All right, that goes on top here. Hopefully yours is in good condition when you took it off. These were. And now I'm gonna go slip this thing down. All right, I hope you guys can see this. So the spring is compressed, and right up in there, you see that white line? It's lined up with the flat portion of the shock. So that is what you need to have happen. So we have the spring compressed, it came down. Now, if I didn't compress the spring, basically you're pushing your body on the spring to kind of get this mount to come down on top of that, which is a very hard thing to do because I did it on the other set. So this is just one way of doing it that's supposed to be easier. So now all we're gonna do is drop the top mount on and then put the nut on and then get the spring compressors off and we should be good to go. So here's the top mount. That goes on right here and this just goes on here. And then we're gonna thread this nut on and kind of lock the whole system together. All right, so at this point, I just gotta tighten this down and then we remove this and pretty much I'll show you what everything looks like here. So I don't wanna use any power tools on this, so I'm gonna just use this thing by hand and then we'll end up torquing this to the proper spec when we're done. Now, if you did this right, when you turn this, you should be able to hold this top piece in place, right? Hold this top piece in place and turn it, and the shock body should not turn on you. And that is the reason why you gotta get it into those tabs. Now we're gonna torque this bolt to 36 foot-pounds, and that's pretty much done. Now look at this. No noise, nice and smooth. Before, this thing would not even turn. So that's good news right here. And then you really don't want to use an impact gun on this thing. I know a lot of guys do, just shoot an impact in to get this bolt tightened up. But the problem is if you tighten it with an impact, you may tighten it, more than likely you're going to tighten it too much, which is going to put too much pressure on the bearing on the inside here. So 36 foot-pounds is what the manufacturer recommends. Exciting times today. We're going to get this 91 MR2 lowered. So it's sitting pretty 4x4-ish, if you want to call it that. And we got the springs ready to go. So these are the H&R Lowered springs that we have. So we're gonna get these installed on the car. But before we do that, we gotta do a before and after. So that's how the front sits. As you can see, a lot of wheel well here. And I'm thinking these H&R is gonna make this thing look much better. And right now it rides like crap. There's a ton of noise, clicking noise coming from the front suspension when you turn. So I think that engine mount is really bad. Well, in the meantime, let's do some measurements. Let's see where we are in terms of height. So we have a before and an after to kind of compare what we're gonna do here today. So if I go right here, this looks like 25 3/8. So on the front wheel, we're 25 3/8 to the fender line from the ground. On the rear, we're sitting right around 26 1/4. So 26 1/4 from the ground all the way up to the rear arch. So we'll throw the suspension on and we'll see what's going on. And I'm really excited because I think this is gonna look pretty good. So let's get right into it. All right, so we got the car on jack stands. All fours are up. I actually finished the right side already, so we're gonna do the left side so you guys can see what's up. And I have the spring fully put together for the front, so we're gonna put the sway bar link on. So we're just gonna put this in here, screw this up, and definitely make sure you put on these sway bar links because if you wait until it's on the car, it's a lot harder to do. So highly recommend that you get these done before you start installing it on the vehicle. Right now, moving along, we're getting the front left strut out, and you gotta pull the brake cable. So we pull the clip that was holding the brake cable right here, pull it off, and get the brake cable loose. Now, if your car was never been touched, which probably it's gonna be hard to find these days, you know, if this thing is welded shut, then you're gonna have to cut right here. Obviously, this car was messed with, so someone already cut where the brake hose goes in. So I can just bend this out and get the cable out. But again, if your car was, if you're lucky enough where your car was never touched, then you'd have to cut this or pull the brake line off, which most people don't do. So I'm just gonna bend this out of the way, just to try to slip this thing up. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. Just bend it until you can get it out. There you go. Yep, and so on. Got the brake hose out. So now we're gonna pull the camber bolts. Now, I know you're supposed to align your car after you do springs, but I'm trying not to align it because it was actually running pretty straight. So So I know the geometry is going to change with lowering springs, but I'm going to go ahead and mark these bolts where I took them off. And then when I put the suspension back, get these camber bolts in the same position. So hopefully this car will still track straight. And I don't have to do an alignment yet because, you know, as we keep modifying this vehicle, an engine swap or whatever we do, it's going to come down to, you know, having to realign again. So I'm trying not to do that. So you mark your camber bolts, kind of mark it on the spindle, and then I'm marking it right in the center. So basically, if I go to the strut right here, I'm kind of marking it along this section. So the bolts will just line up with these tabs right here to kind of mimic the way the suspension was set from the get-go. All right, so just a little tip right there. Don't know if it works, but that's what we're working with. So I've done it before, it kind of worked. It didn't really have too much trouble. But now we're gonna go get these 19mm camber nuts pulled, get this part loose, and then there are 4 14mm bolts on the top hat here, and then the suspension should just drop right out. The sway bar link as well, I forgot to mention that. You got to pull that off. I pulled it from the sway bar itself. And here you go. I loosened that before off camera. So once I take it out, you'll see what I'm talking about. But let's just get right into this. Get the suspension up. Here's our rusty factory strut. Brake cable is in good shape. And there you go. So we're gonna put this off to the side. And here we go. Those are the two. So this will replace this guy. All right, so let's go with the reinstall. Finish up the front and now we're moving to the back, so I'm going to get this out and then we're going to rebuild this strut and put it back in, and we should be done because the other side is complete. So pull the sway bar link off, pull it from the bar itself. Now we're going to pull these camber bolts, and then we pull the 3 nuts on the top right here. Now if you notice, I put this cardboard right here. I put it there because if you're not careful when you're pulling the strut out, you can break the axle boot. So you just kind of put a cardboard in place just to kind of help yourself out so you don't inadvertently bust your axle boot and create another problem that you're not trying to create. So as you can see, look at this cardboard. See how it's scratched up? So pretty much that's what was gonna happen to your axle boot if you're not careful, and you don't wanna pull the spindle out too far, because then you could run the risk of, you know, pulling the axle out to the transmission and getting some transmission fluid to leak. All right, or having to slip that thing back in later on. So we're gonna pull this apart now, rebuild the rear shock on the one we're gonna put in, and rock and roll. Alright, so we're in the final stages here to get the rear strut rebuilt. It is super hot in this garage, so I'm probably sweating like a pig, but hey, we gotta do what we gotta do. It's Florida, right? So anyways, let's get into it. We have the strut housed in here, and then we have our new gas shock. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna drop this thing right in here. You wanna check to make sure there's nothing stuck in here. And some, like Coney's, they put like coolant or oil or transmission fluid a little bit down in here, but for KYB apparently it's not recommended. So you put your strut in, you put your gland nut on, the new one that you got in the kit, and you're gonna make sure this goes in nice and smooth. See, like how that's sticking? It should not. So you gotta make sure it goes like that, perfectly smooth, thread it in. You shouldn't have to fight it until it gets to the very end. All right, and then we're gonna just drop it in my little vise right here, and I'm gonna use my good old adjustable wrench. I don't know what size it is, and I'm just gonna tighten this thing. And this is a pretty big wrench, so whatever torque I put on this should be fine. I don't want to go crazy. I don't want to strip this thing out. I just want to get it nice and tight. So just enough so this thing doesn't back out on us. All right, so there you go. So now we have our new insert, right? Next thing, we put our dust boot on. All right, and now we're gonna get, here's my the strut mount I took off the car and repainted and got it cleaned up. So we're gonna get this thing in here. Now remember, there's a flat spot that has to line up on the shaft. So basically, gotta make sure it goes in. It shouldn't be able to turn like this. It should be able to be stuck on like that, okay? So this comes right up, it needs to be aligned with this, okay? So we just turn the shot mount like that. And now we're gonna get the spring ready. So essentially we got the spring seated in this little notch right here. I compressed the spring so I had room to put this thing down and fit it into the notch, put the spacer on and then put the nut on and then spin it down. Then I release the spring compression to come up and lock in place. Here, this part, you gotta have this little, see where the one nut is, like forms like a triangle, has to line up here. That's the proper way to clock the spring. And we're good to go. The only thing left now is to torque this bolt. So we're gonna torque this down, and this is torqued to 54 foot-pounds. So let's get this thing lined up and get it all torqued. There you go. Alright, so shock is done. Now we gotta put it in the car and drop it down and we're done. Alright, so we're gonna do the reverse of how we took it out. The triangular piece to the outside of the car. Put your cardboard so you don't mess anything up. And we're gonna head up in here. Just gonna catch one of these bolts right here. And we're gonna finish aligning under the bottom. Got to get our brake cable in and our sway bar link in. Now this sway bar link, it looks pretty beefy, but it's very, very tight to the chassis of the car. It's not touching though, but it definitely doesn't have the same clearance as the factory one. But it works, and this manufacturer, they say torque it to 48 foot-pounds. So that's what we're gonna do. Alright, so what do you guys think? It's on the ground and it's lowered, so let's do the measuring test to see how lower this thing went. I showed you the before, so let's look at the after. And I want to say, I think it was 26 on the back, so now we're right at 25. And there's still a little bit of wheel well, but it just came down, so I'm sure once it dries, it's going to settle a little bit more. So 25, and I think it looks pretty good. And on the front, we got, looks like 24 and a half more or less. So all in all, a nice little drop. So let's just get the side profile of the car here. I'm going to show you guys what it looks like down the line here. I think it's looking sweet. And I was hoping to drive it today, but honestly, I am so tired. I don't know if I'm going to drive it today. Probably do another video driving it because it's super hot today in the garage and I had it closed. So, you know, it's just been a rough day, but it's done and I'm liking how it looks. So I hope you guys like this one, as I always say, and I appreciate any comments and keep those subscriptions coming. Have a great day.